So, welcome back to Round Rant, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Jonathan Higgs, who is the lead singer of the band Everything Everything.
Hello.
So, first and foremost, thanks for coming on the
Thanks for
show,
having me.
John. Thanks for
Thanks for
taking
asking.
time out. And
Cheers.
how's everything with you today?
Great. I'm hungover a little bit. Um, Went out last night to see this thing at Manchester International Festival, which was a kind of VR concert for Ryuichi Sakamoto, who I guess had made the concert and then died. So the whole thing was quite strange. So it was like a VR thing where he was in front of us playing the piano and you could walk all around him. But it was made quite eerie because obviously he passed away, so it was pretty moving. Actually, it was cool. And then I got really pissed.
Sounds like a good evening.
Yeah, it was
Interesting
great.
evening. And yeah, so there's plenty of stuff to dig through, but what I always tend to ask firstly is like I ask for childhood stories. Sometimes I go through the A to Z of one's childhood. I don't want to absolutely bore you to death by doing that, but when a musician comes on, like I looked at some of your early years and some of the information I could gather up. Like there was stuff like you creating websites to correct examiners
Mm,
who screwed up your
yeah.
exams, stuff like that. So it kind of suggested that you had this nearly rebel instinct in you at an early age. But like when you're a child and when you were a teenager, like what were you getting up into your spare time? Was it purely music, or was it just being an absolute messer? Was it being a nerd? Like what did you see yourself as?
um, it's a cliche, but yeah, pretty very much an outsider. Um, it's not like I was unpopular, but I certainly had a strong distrust, and I guess I still do, for the mainstream in any regard. Anything that most people are doing, I'm usually distrustful of. But unfortunately, that way of thinking has kind of become quite toxic in the last decade, I would say. And the conspiracy and the mistrust of everything is kind of boring now to me. It's actually fascinating when somebody believes something now. But yeah, certainly as a teen, it was I would carve out places in school, literally physical places, areas of the school where me and my friends would hang out and no one else would go to. For some reason, that was always something that we did. We would find a room that was unused or something, and we would make it into our place completely. Um, yeah, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in a tiny little village, um, and we weren't really from there. The lineage of those kind of places goes back hundreds of years, and we weren't one of those families, so we always felt a little bit like we didn't fit in there. But then, going to school in a larger town, we were the weirdos from the sticks too. So it didn't really work. That didn't really work either. So yeah, parents are very scientific people, both biologists to some degree or study biology. My dad's very much into paleontology and archaeology, and he collects animal skulls. Well, and there's a couple of humans as well, but he collects skulls. He has got one human skull and a human knee bone, um,
Okay.
and so the house has always been full of animal skulls. And the way you get animal skulls isn't that you just find them, although some of them were. No, you find roadkill and you stop the car on family trips, get out, put it in the back in a plastic bag, or if it's a big animal, there and then you hack its head off and take it home with you, and then you put it in. He started out boiling them, but he found that wasn't the best way of doing it. So he actually started to use these types of acids, and he has all these acids for dissolving flesh. And but then the best technique of all is using these beetles that I think come from Africa that are really good at eating flesh and they leave everything else. However, they escaped into our garden shed, so that's always been a bit of a fear. But in that garden shed, there's like a mummified cat hanging from the roof. It's just kind of like this. Obviously,
Yeah.
I think it was from the side of a um, train line. I think it got hit by a train. Um, yeah, so my childhood was full of death, and he would dissect things like rats, squirrels on the kitchen table. Um, because he would have his scalpels and everything, and he would always show us, this is the lungs and this is the liver and this is everything, and with the smell of it. And I can remember this huge soup sort of cooking pot in the utility room, and it had this Alsatian's head in it, just in a bloody bag. This fucking massive wolf dog. You can imagine how
Yeah.
scary they are in real life, but it was beheaded and just in this thing in the dark, and that freaked me out. That's one I really remember really well. But the freezer was often full of carcasses too. But anyway, that's just one little thing. So I think that's a big part of my childhood was what my dad was up to, which is um, hobbies that he would take very, very seriously, um, sort of semi-professional at everything, and not actually a master of anything. I would say he still is um, a photographer, but he was like the school photographer, and his photos. He would go abroad to Greenland. That's where my parents um, conceived my brother. Actually, was on this exhibition in Greenland, looking at these geese that were going extinct, and yeah, they just got dropped there with a few other hippies and a crate of Mars bars, but it exploded. So anyway, they would he would go to somewhere like Greenland and come back with these photos. And I remember as a kid, I would look at them and be like, "Oh yeah, amazing! What a photographer!" But when I look at them now, they're very sort of documentarian. There isn't actually much artistry to any of the stuff he did. And the more I think about it, he actually doesn't. He isn't a very artistic person at all, but he's extremely interested in the world and applies himself. He's endlessly fascinated. They both are. But my mum is much more artistic. She's a great singer. She plays the guitar, um, and she's much more of a dreamer. She's C of E to a greater or lesser extent, but she's very involved with the church. So I get a lot of anything sort of supernatural. I get from her, and anything completely natural
Yeah.
I get from my dad. So it's a good combination, actually, that I've come to appreciate. I think if they were both extremely science, then I wouldn't have any romance in me at all, and vice versa. I think it's a really good
Okay, so
mix.
bit of
Yeah,
yin to the yang. I always think
yeah.
whenever I hear of people, like you were saying with your dad, I don't know if you've seen the film Predator, but
It's one of my favorites. Literally one of my favorites.
yeah, so when he just like takes his victims and just like rips
Yeah,
out the skulls, cleans
yeah,
the skulls, I used to always think that's how the likes of animal skulls were kind of
yeah.
paraded around
It's not
people's
that
houses.
far. It's not that different. My house is still completely full. There's like a muskox skull when you first walk in, and um, what do you call it? Like a swordfish, the huge lance they have on the front of their face. A narwhal, sorry, narwhal. Um, yeah, some alligators and stuff. But that was so. My childhood was very much science. Being the weirdo, having a very eccentric, certainly father, um, and not feeling part of anything, not feeling part of society really, um, and being very, very, very distrustful of fashion or um, commercialism of any kind. So something like Disney we'd be completely allergic to as a family, and
Yeah,
we mercilessly take the piss out of anyone who was involved in anything that was popular, like Barbie or whatever.
yeah,
Obviously, I've softened up in later life, but that was like the beginning. Was like you just don't do it. Don't do what anyone else is doing. Just don't fucking do it. Because
yeah,
it's stupid and it's, quite. We didn't have a TV, so I didn't have a TV until I was 16, till the millennium. Um, so throw that into the mix. Evenings and Saturday mornings were not spent watching TV. I did have some friends just down the road who had a TV on constantly, so I managed to get what I needed in terms of Power Rangers or whatever. I knew all the stuff, and I would watch, as you say, Predator, funnily enough, and a lot of films I shouldn't have been seeing um, that age. So they had a much older brother who would play the worst, the most extreme stuff he could get his hands on. So I saw all my aliens and anything sex and violence very, very, very young, which also uh, sort of went hand in hand with some of the more weird stuff that I was seeing in every day. You know, violence, not violence towards animals, but the reality of death, I suppose, which you can get very desensitized to. Well, you just don't ever encounter. I don't encounter it at all in my life anymore. When I eat a chicken burger, I'm not thinking about a chicken, but my dad used to go into the garden with an axe and come back with blood all over him and a dead chicken, and that is a very different experience. But I also think that's probably the right experience. If you're gonna eat something, you should probably at least think about how it's died.
Yeah,
Um, but I'm very guilty of not thinking that stuff.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And yeah, I was quite of a similar ilk. I didn't have a smartphone till I was
yeah.
17 and stuff like that. And I was also exposed. I remember the first film I watched with my dad was Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock. So
Oh, that's amazing.
I could barely get into a shower for about 4 years. And then moved swiftly onto Jaws. So every holiday by the sea was a nightmare too.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's good exposure at an early age, I'd say.
I
And
think it's fine. Yeah.
one thing I was looking at was you then went on and studied music.
Yep.
That's kind of where you met a lot of the band.
Yep.
And I'm cautious that you've got skin in this game and you've been around it for quite a while now and like 6 albums deep. But like
Hmm.
when you were starting off, and I've been myself in a band here in Dublin. I'm not there anymore, but we had the dreams of, making it big, having our own sold out shows and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
at the time in England, like say when you started the band and you kind of
Yep.
felt that you had a bit of talent for it, what was the kind of outlook in the music scene? Because it's gone through so many changes in the last 25 years. Like what was it like at that time?
Well, we were going through the post Britpop um, sort of. I don't know what there'll definitely be a name for this time, but it was the Libertines sort of era
Yeah.
where it was all about it sort of was a lot about image at that time. I felt, even though they would roundly disagree, I still think that being a fucked up junkie is kind of an image. And that was it, it was and
It was no
it
true.
was partly why that genre was in the papers all the time. It's why Kate Moss was going out. It's not that they're personally their fault. They're just normal, they're just regular people. But that whole scene was all about, like, yeah, we're fucked up and we play our guitars kind of shitty and we don't care because we're poets deep down. And it was fine. It just really wasn't turning me on. And my friends and I were we'd had a steady diet of Radiohead and Smashing Pumpkins or whatever, um, and we were listening to a lot of math rock when we were at uni. So it was all about players that could play and trying to expand the old formulas and all that kind of shit. Prog, essentially, with a different name. And so we were really much railing against the pork pie hat wearing bands of the time. And we also had a being up on it about Manchester, because I'd moved to Manchester because obviously I'm not from there. I'm from the borderlands, and we went there. Sorry, I moved there, and it was everywhere I turned was just, oh, Manchester this, Manchester that. Do you remember these bands from the past? And I was thinking, well, yeah, but that was ages ago. And when I think of it now, it wasn't even a decade past. I got there in 2002, I think, or three. And actually, not that long after the Happy Mondays were in the charts, really. And so I would, to begin at the beginning of the band, I would be like, oh, they're all shit. We need a new sound and all this stuff, which I think very much was the mentality I came out of the blocks with. Was like, fuck everything. We're doing something different, which is understandable when you're an outsider and you come to a massive place like this that's still in love with something that you're not and you can't be and has already happened and you didn't think was that good. You're like, right, fuck this, we're going to tear shit up. Which I love when bands come through like that. They just hate everyone. When a band comes through and they hate my band, I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
that's what I want. That's exactly what I want.
Yeah.
So that was the atmosphere, and we went into it very very quickly. We I had been writing songs for years, and some of my friends thought that they were good, and a particular friend of mine passed the CD to this guy in the industry, and it went from there to there to there, and before you knew it, it was getting picked up, and we hadn't, and I didn't even have a band. These are just demos I'd made,
Yeah.
and so I put this band together very quickly. I'd known all the members for years because of different bands, but I was like, right, after uni, I'm going to start the band, the proper band. Got all this interest already, so we started it. We actually booked our first gig, I think 6 weeks hence, and then we had our first rehearsal. So we had a gig coming up, and we'd never even played together, and we had to get a gig ready. So that was like a bit of a batsman fire, but I think young bands are also great with that. They just fucking do it. They go and they go and
Got
rehearse.
to make it work.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and we all moved in together. We had a basement, and we just made loads of noise in Didsbury. Um, it was great, and we were so confident because we already had A&R interested in the songs that were already recorded. So it was just like, fuck, all we've got to do is play these and write a couple more. Um, which, in
Yeah.
hindsight, going that fast, I wouldn't recommend unless you're absolutely certain of your band, and you can be certain about yourself. You can't be certain about your band. You don't know how everything's going to shake out. And my best friend, he ended up leaving the band um, just before we got signed. Sort of as we were getting signed, he was like, I'm out of here," and that's not great. I'd rather have a
Yeah.
friend. I'd rather have a friend than a band, but um, it's difficult to predict how things will go. I played it over and over again in my mind about how things went with that, and I don't know what I would do differently. Probably everything, but I always felt that you get what you maybe get 1.5 chances, and we had a chance, and it was like, well, I'm not going to not get signed. It was difficult,
Yeah. It
and
kind
it's a
of
lot.
it sounds a little bit like my predicament where
Yeah.
me and one of my close friends, where he was the lead singer of the band, and I had to
Hmm.
tell him just as we got management and booked for festivals and shows and started
Yeah.
being on the radio, I had to tell him that, sorry, I have to
Yeah.
focus on college. So I remember at the time how shit it was for both of us, and for about 2 months it
Hmm.
was like not really speaking. Then we kind of got over it once the band kind of kept going. But it is, as you said, it you'd nearly rather have the friend full time than the band at that stage. But one thing
Yeah.
you were covering there, John, is the band itself. Like you wrote many demos and maybe had all these singles in your back pocket, which is always the luxury of most first albums. You have most of the
Yeah.
material sorted. But like, how did you find working with the other band members? Because like, I'm not going to keep referring back to my experience, but like, I love Blink 182. My lead singer loved U2. The other one was like a hybrid of everything. Then the other was a bit more punk, and that kind of clashes when you have an overall view of how you want to sound
Hmm.
naturally. But did say like all you guys have similar kind of ideas for the band, or was there a bit of give and take, a bit of fight
I
back from certain elements?
No, I think we all were pretty much in the same ballpark. I think we all held certain bands at the very top of our trees, and yeah, we would have had different branches below it, but the Beatles, Radiohead, the best bands we all had in common. It wasn't like someone was like, well, actually, you know, Rush are the best band. It was like, no, no, we know what the five pillars of Islam are,
Yeah,
and we yeah, I mean, I think if we were all completely the same, that'd be pretty boring. I think it's pretty great when there is a bit of give and take. You learn stuff from each other, and you don't, you just have. There's no point having a load of clones. So Mike um, studied jazz, our drummer, and he did a year in Boston when he was at uni, um, studying music out there, studying drums out there. So he's got this huge jazz knowledge that I have no idea about, and he can dip into that anytime and go, "Oh, you mean a bit more like, you know, this jazz person I've never heard of, and I'll do something that I could never have imagined. And Alex is the same. He's got a jazz side to him, but he's also got all these guitar legends that I have no interest in. But and neither does he, to be honest. But he's got an amazing amount of skill, and he can um, ape things pretty quickly and pretty well. And Jez has got all this post rock world. He was very much embedded in the sort of DIY scene in Kent, where he's from, and they had um, this whole scene basically that was all about DIY ethic and punk and this particular sound, which is actually, I would say, kind of quite popular now. There's a lot of bands right now that sound a bit like that scene, where you'll have a singer who's basically talking and then shouting, and the band's just sort of, it's not more, it's much less songy. It's kind of
Yeah.
like, what's that Irish one that's big at the moment? Uh, Fuck, there is one.
Band?
Yeah, there's a band. Anyway, sounds a bit like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's great having a full spread like that is really good. Well, I think having um, a varied skill set is actually imperative for being in a band. If you're all the same personality type and you've all got the same attitude, then there's going to be areas that never get looked at. So I've known bands where everyone has a big ego, everyone can't be asked, and everyone wants to be in control of everything. And as you can imagine, that means that certain things never get done, certain
Yeah.
things never get talked about, and certain things have far too many cooks spoiling the broth. And we have those problems too. But I think we fit together personality wise pretty well. There's not too much of anything. I think we've got a pretty good balance of what we need. And so we keep things covered. We keep things like, the boring business side of it is actually being talked about. It's, not just left to mysterious, shadowy people, and the creative stuff we all have a hand in. I'm good at video and image and music. Alex is incredible at producing music, etc., etc. So we have quite a lot of transferable skills.
Which is good. Which is good on the team,
It
especially
definitely is.
creative one. And the like your music, it comes in all different shapes and sizes, which I suppose is a testament to your longevity and creativity, is what I would say. And like some of your music, it doesn't. If you played it next to 10 chart songs, and I'm not necessarily saying that's what you want to be, but like just if you pick 10 of the most generic songs that you hear on the radio and just stuck yours in the middle, any random song of yours, it could just have any instrumentation, any running length, any type of harmonies and whatnot, which is great. But how does that manifest itself? Because you're so creative with your songwriting, the instrumentation. Sometimes I hear things that I'm like, that's not a drum. Like, how that can't be a drum. Like, that's someone hitting a kitchen pan in an attic to
Oh
get the
yeah.
echo sound. So, like, how do you not so much replicate, because it's obviously done, but the creative process for you and the band making such unique noises in the most basic way possible? Like, what does that look like?
Um, I think with everything I write, everything Alex writes, we're both trying to do something we haven't done before, which is an absolute like standard practice. If as soon as before I even show it to anyone, if I hear myself repeating myself, then I'm like, I'll save that and close it, and I'm probably not going to open it again, unless it's spectacularly catchy or something, or I've fallen across something that just really works. So it's usually find something that is exciting to you because you haven't done it before, um, and then I always try and make sure that there's a skeleton that doesn't rely on anything fancy. You should be able to play the hook, the main chorus hook, say, with guitar chords and voice, and that's it. And someone should be able to say that's good.
Yeah.
Then you can start making it interesting. If you don't have that first bit, then you're in a trap that quite a lot of people fall into, which is a song that sounds amazing, but there's nothing there, and no one's going to get moved by it, and no one's going to get excited by it beyond hype production bollocks. Basically, if you have both those things, if you have a great core and then you make it as exciting as you can, then you're onto something good. So I think that's how it always starts: is try and surprise yourself at the same so as not to the detriment of the song being good. So get that balance right, surprising but also enjoyable, because God knows you can have surprising music that's not enjoyable. There's entire genres of that, and then try and present it in the most exciting way you can, and also take some risks. So there's always a moment when we're making a record where someone will turn around and just be like, "What is this genre? Like, what the fuck are we doing?" And whenever we pick up on that, we're like, "Right, we're definitely doing the right thing." That's a really good thing to hear, as long as it's genuine. If there's a good few moments where you're going, "What the actual fuck? How can we get away with this?" Then we know we're doing something good, and we'll pursue that. If it's just like, "This is good, this is cool, sounds a bit like Radiohead, and it's pleasant," then it doesn't make it to the record, because that's obviously what happens to a lot of our demos.
Yeah, you need to add a bit more spice to that dish.
Yeah, yeah.
And do you think, because you've seen it all, say when you started in college and started doing your demos, a lot of stuff was one take, a lot of it had errors, and like I even love
Hmm.
listening to a cappella bass tracks from the 90s, and you can actually
Nice.
hear like the actual mistakes,
Hmm.
like, or even the bum notes or whatever it may be. Nowadays with Pro Tools, everything can be perfect if you wanted to. Like
Indeed.
absolutely everything, your voice, the guitar playing, even the sounds, it can be all pitch corrected. Is that I may know the answer to this question, but I still need to ask, like, is that a temptation that sometimes affects your songwriting? Is that one of the biggest battles you have to do when, like, you take part in the creative process?
Absolutely. Although I would say it doesn't affect the writing, but it affects
Production?
the presentation of it. That's something we say on literally every album, and that, I'm not exaggerating. We've said it 7 times now. Let's not over tweak and make this too perfect. Let's keep the mistakes. And every single record, we completely make it perfect, or to within probably 85% perfect, and then maybe 15% tiny bit of error. The thing is, as soon as you beat detect a drum track, say, even if you only do it 80%, so that's when you get everything in time perfectly, then if there is, say, a late crash or something, the drummer's sat there and we listen to the track maybe 50 times because of everything, recording process. On day 9, he's gonna go, "Guys, can you just move the crash back tiny? It's pissing me off." Because obviously he is. And if I'm listening to a vocal track, 80% of it's perfectly in tune, and then I hit this big note halfway through and it's off, and I have to listen to that 30 times. And then on day 9, I'm going to say, "Guys, can you tune that?" Because it just fucking happens. But something that made me feel okay about that was a Billy Corgan interview I read years ago, and he was saying, if you're going to record this song once, this thing that you think is great, and you're going to play it 9,000 times in your life, why wouldn't you make that one recording the best possible version you could possibly do? It's not like Michelangelo left his mistakes, you know.
Yeah, all
Although
over the
he
place.
probably
Yeah,
did, and that's probably why it's good. It probably is flawed. It's an age old question, and there probably are loads of flaws in the things we consider perfect anyway. You
yeah.
know, so
That
fuck those. I don't even know what the answer to that is. You just do it until you're happy, and you don't. Sometimes the thing is, you process it to the point, because that's the point. You want it to be able to fit in alongside heavily tuned pop music, because this is a subversive pop track. We want to take this perfect voice and that Britney's got, whatever, and put it in this world where she wouldn't belong or whatever. And so you actually do tune it and time it and all the rest of it, because you want it to sound like that. You want it. We just did a record where I was talking a lot about AI, and robots and stuff. And goddamn right we want me to sound quite false, actually, and we want everything to be perfect. We want everything, So it really depends on what you're making. If we were making a punk record, we wouldn't be tuning and timing. God, that would be horrible.
Yeah. Be a long couple of months in the studio, I'd imagine.
It would just be like American sort of, yeah, it wouldn't be good.
Yeah.
It depends
And
what you're doing, I think.
yeah, true. And you somewhat alluded to it there where you talked about maybe expectations or the view of art. If you show, or even the painting behind me, it's some bog standard painting. If you look at it, you might see one thing. I look at it, I see
Yeah.
another. And that's the exact same thing with music. I could play No Reptiles by yourselves and I
Hmm.
could love it, but then someone else could be like, that's the worst song I've ever heard.
Yeah.
With all
Yeah.
due respect, that's the glory of it. But
Great.
how do you, because you're in a public sphere, it's not like you're just putting up stuff and it's getting one view by,
Hmm.
the cat in the room. It is,
I wish.
it has been, critiqued, it has been viewed by thousands, if not millions. And how do you like personally manage that relationship or even expectation with your personal art where you're putting it all on the table and fans and even non-fans are judging your every move, your every note, or in this case, your every produced song?
It's quite easy if they like it, they're um, very intelligent. If they don't like it, they're fucking idiot morons. It's easy. That's it. They're just morons if they don't get it.
Okay.
Absolute morons.
So for the non everything fans out there, you're
Yeah,
all
you're just stupid. It's okay, but that's the reason that you don't like it.
bigoted Neanderthals, basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Fair, fair. That's a good way of putting it.
I've never let it really. Well, it's weird. I always say like, oh, I've never let it hurt me. But the truth is, we actually don't really get bad reviews. And I know that sounds big headed, but our first like four records or something were just honestly very well reviewed critically.
Yeah, they were.
And I haven't really looked at the last couple because I just, pandemic, I just wasn't that into anything like everyone. So I didn't really read the last ones, but I know it was generally well received. Um, and I feel as though we've proved ourselves so many times that I'm not that bothered about what the critics say. And fans, I think we kind of live in a bit of a time where if you're not into something, you just don't come across it. You have to seek out the things you're into now because there is no, it's not like we've got three TV channels anymore. So some hypothetical guy who doesn't like my band, he's probably not going to hear it unless he's listening to the radio or, we're on TV coverage of something. And at those points, yeah, you do get the occasional person who doesn't like it, but really you're leading a group of people who already like you around for years on end, this same group. And sometimes it gets bigger, sometimes it gets smaller, but it's the same core audience who already like what you do. And you're not going to stray so far away from that they start disliking you, because I think we probably have similar tastes in music, the band and the fans, because we keep making it because we think it's good, and they keep listening to it because they think it's good. It's like I don't get the feeling of like, oh shit, because if I think something's good, then really that's all you can do. I've seen so many things where people have said this is amazing, this is amazing, this is amazing, and then I check it out and it isn't amazing to me.
Yeah.
So you can only prove stuff to yourself, and I think everything we do is great, and I think that's a good place to be
Yeah, it's good.
mentally as a creator. Really, like if you're doubting yourself the whole time, people can tell. Like if you go and watch a band and the front man or woman or front person is doubting themselves, you see it instantly, and you see it in. It's not just about music. You see it in an actor. You see it in an audition. You see it in a job interview. Really, what you're selling a lot of the time in the world and in your life is just confidence in yourself, and people pick up on it. I can go on stage no matter what's happening in my life, and if I act like I'm very confident in myself, because I will be, people will pick up on it, even if I'm singing all over the place. people pick up on it, and in many ways, that's what they came to see is someone confident in themselves. It's not actually obviously there is music, but there's this huge element that isn't really um, talked about, where you just want the experience of observing somebody confident, and I think that's also what movie star power is as well. This kind of elusive thing where some people have it, some people don't, and you can't just say it's their looks or their ability to emote. It's this other thing where they have this inner confidence, and that's what is so attractive to humans, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting way of putting it because it
That's why
is.
you get people like Jesus Christ, literally somebody confident who seems to have figured out something. You follow them, you literally follow them, and you'll do whatever you can for them. And I do it too. I do it for the bands I like and the directors I like, and the politicians I believe in. I'm like, fuck, it's really, they could be speaking Japanese and I would still get the feeling. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, like it is an act at the end of the day, like especially the
Absolutely.
live performance. Like
Yeah.
I remember seeing Frankie Boyle a few months ago, and he was saying stuff like he's like, "This is an act. Everything I'm doing here is
Hmm.
creative. It's not who I am. I don't go around the street heckling
Yeah.
people and saying stupid one-liners."
Yeah.
But it is an interesting thought to have of kind of the arts or the entertainment side of things, and
Yeah.
with say yourselves having been around for a very long time, gone through several albums as well. Like one thing I always thought about yourself, particularly whenever I've read interviews, you have a creative mind. Like that's absolutely obvious.
Yeah.
We don't need to delve into that. But an element of music that I find really, really interesting, which I think a lot maybe of the casual fans don't, is how particular albums, like the last 3-4 years of albums, most of the ones I've listened to have a dark undertone due to the pandemic, or it's some loneliness or
Yeah.
something, escapism in some way, shape, or form. But how do you find I suppose, your mental health when it comes to songwriting? Like, can you divorce the two? Because a lot of times people, and you've even said it yourself, you write kind of how you feel. Some
Yeah.
people have said in the past, I have really dark thoughts, but I'm a pop star. People don't want to be hearing about me questioning my life and mortality. Like, what effect does your mental health, whether it's in a real positive state or a negative state, have on your music? Or is it basically the sole deciding factor in how your music will sound and what lyrically will be written?
Yeah, I think I'm in a lucky position compared to your example there, because no one's making me pretend something I'm not. I'm not a pop star, and I've found my audience by singing about my feelings, and almost all of it is actually incredibly negative. Perhaps I would say the idea people have of me is probably somewhat skewed to the negative. I see a lot of people writing that I have depression, that my songs are about depression, or like on Lyric Genius, or like, oh, this is another song about depression, and this is how the depression won't leave him, and all this shit, which is fine, and I'm not going to call that out, but it's I don't have depression,
Yeah.
so but I do get sad sometimes, and there was a long period of my life where I was sad, um, because of how my life was, and there's been a change in the last few years, and I think it's been reflected in my music. Certainly, Raw Data Feel, I made an effort to try and sound positive and try and make some positive statements, really, like I feel good and things like this. Um, yeah, so it does affect me. I would struggle, I think, to write a song um, where that wasn't true. If I was feeling good and I was thinking I'm going to sit down and write the saddest song ever written, it just wouldn't happen. It would just be completely absurd. And also, if I was feeling like shit, I wouldn't sit down and write a positive song. So yeah, of course, it is a reflection that I'm not in any. I don't have any desire to change that, because it's the best stuff is was always the stuff that's true, um, and that goes for any art form, really.
Yeah. No, fairly put. It's a point I kind of wanted to ask because I've had musicians on in the past, and sometimes they've said, record label gave them pressure for singles, so they just kind of wrote a song on a whim
Oh yeah, I mean
and stuff like that.
we always know we're going to need 5 radio friendly songs, say. But we've known that always since before we were a band. We wanted to be a band that's on the radio. We wanted to be a band that people actually know about, and we know that singles is the way. And we love singles ourselves. We were brought up on them, and we listen to them all the fucking time. That's what good music is. The best songs are the singles, usually. And so we've always had that knowledge, and we've always done that. There's never been a time when we've presented a record to a label, and we've been on a lot of labels now, and they've gone, yeah, but where are the singles? I mean, they do say that, but we go, here they are. There's never, that's not a problem, I don't think, because we're realistic, and we're not trying to destroy the system of singles and radio and live performance and everything that suddenly gets jettisoned when you step out of that. Like, we want to be a band that people know about, because we just want to be like our heroes, and they all have singles. That's what we want to make.
Yeah, and you've done a fairly decent job of cropping up with a few big time singles, and I said it earlier on the podcast, like No Reptiles, which I don't know, maybe I'm completely way off in saying that doesn't strike me as maybe compared
No,
to say Distant Past.
that's not a
It's
single in anyone's book, and I'm
yeah,
still amazed we managed to get that put
but
out.
but yeah, it is. It's such an obscure song that I remember it just came on my YouTube recommend years and years and years and years ago,
Mm.
and I was just like, fuck, like lyrically, this is insane. The like tonality shifts were mental. Like at the start, you're kind of the high pitched singing, and
Yeah,
then it
yeah.
it builds up to that like epic outro nearly. But the lyrics in that song kind of, and this is again going back to like lyric genius or song meaning. This is
Hmm.
my perception of it. You can tell me I'm completely wrong because that is well within your right and you've got the facts. But it's kind of like being nearly like pissed off a little bit with how society was and how like people are acting and like where people were in the world, but like focusing in on that particular song because I want to be a bit self-indulgent here as the host
Hmm.
of this podcast, but like how did that song come to be, and what is in your terms anyway the message behind it?
Um, I think that the big melody, the that came to me walking down the street actually, that's probably only happened to me like twice, and I knew that it had to do that thing where it leaves the gap and then does the old enough to fire again. I knew that had to happen, and I had this overwhelming sense that this was like someone else's song, or this is like a great song by the Smiths or something. And I went home and probably, in fact, on the street, I probably sang that into my phone. And then I went home and I made it, and I had this intro. I was just like, this is just a thing that repeats. This is not really a song. There needs to be something else. So I made the start bit. And for a long time, my kind of default mode is just to sing very fast and in a falsetto because that feels most comfortable to me. And I had this verse that was just like, it probably wasn't
Yeah.
even real words. Um, I don't know. It actually does have a strange conception, that song. It doesn't feel like your average one where you sit down with a guitar. It just sort of fell into my head, and it had to be that way. There was no like softening of it. There was no editing of it. It was just that was the thing, and it was really strange. And I presented it to the guys, and they really liked it, and the rest is history. But yeah, I mean, what it's about, I think the big lyric about the fat child. It was. I was pretty despairing around that time. There was a lot of problems in the world. It was when terrorism was really hotting up, and there was um, various people from the UK had been caught and beheaded on camera, and it was just all horrifying and terrifying. And I was feeling quite terrorized myself because I was following it so religiously.
Yeah.
Um, no pun intended. And this was really a feeling of helplessness, and I think I may have even seen like literally an overweight child in a pushchair or something like this, and thinking like he should be running about. Why
Yeah.
the fuck is he in a chair? Why is he so helpless? And no, no offense to this little guy, if he even existed. I
Yeah.
may have just made this up, but I wanted to capture the sense of helplessness, of feeling like um, a sort of coddled, plump, hairless, kind of useless person in the world, but with no transferable skills and no survival instinct, and no use to anybody, and just sort of helpless, Western, comfortable. It's a thing. It's a theme that I come back to an awful lot actually across my songs. It's just a feeling of I wouldn't say guilt, but it's almost like a wasted opportunity when I've got this body and I've got this brain and I'm using it in such a soft way. I'm not in touch with the world, and I'm not doing anything that's any use. And my ancestors would be appalled to see me now. But at the same time, I can perfectly understand that they would kill literally to have a glass of water as clean as my one, or a
Yeah.
bed as soft as mine, all the rest of it. And the fact that we all live like ancient kings now, and we take it for granted. But it was sort of tinged with this kind of horror, the horror of the time, which was this the death's just around the corner, and these these radicals really believe in something real, and they're really doing something real because they believe it so much they're willing to kill themselves, blow themselves up. And there was something about um, the stark reality of that really went into Get to Heaven as a whole, and me kind of longing to believe something that strongly rather than just be cynical of everything and have this coddled life. So really, it was my frustration, but at the same time, I kind of knew that a lot of people probably felt like that because they absolutely have to. And so me singing "It's All Right" to feel like that is kind of like trying to reassure people, trying to reassure myself that this is not. It's not like it's a a first world problem, but it's. I think it's just something that we don't even have the language for. It's not really ever discussed. It's not really this particular kind of anxiety. It's not. It's not. It's we never encounter it really. So I don't know. I don't know why it had the effect it did, that song, but it really did connect with people, and it's still the best song I've written. And then the stuff that comes after it is about I just want one opportunity, just give me this one night, to feel to feel. I mean, I say
Yeah.
it in the song. It couldn't be more simple. That's the other thing that I really like about it. It isn't there is no metaphor there. I'm literally saying what I mean.
Yeah.
Just give me this one night to feel like I might be on the right path. I might be doing something right. I might be okay. I might be useful. I was feeling very I was feeling useless in my life in lots of other ways, and it was a very insane time. Um, but
Yeah.
whatever it is, enough people know without even having to explain it. They just seem to get it. That song, something about it that I can't. I'm discovering now. I can't even put into words properly myself.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is probably a good thing because I'm
yeah, it's
sure you've
about
thought about it a
some
lot.
huge unanswered thing that a lot of people seem to be feeling. This sense that living in the modern world is wrong in some deep way that can't be defined. And that's what I've been writing about since day one, since My Keys, Your Boyfriend came out. And on the record that we're writing right now, I'm still, the same themes are there, that something is terribly, deeply wrong about modern life, and it's leaving a hole in our souls.
Yeah.
But no one can tell us what it is, and no one knows how to fix it. And I don't want to give up any of my luxuries either. But there is definitely something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the latest album of yours, Raw Data Feel, you even said earlier that you used AI
Yep.
to create some lyrics, also some
Indeed.
of the artwork as well, which is it's an interesting thing. Like some of my mates say, I'm like, oh, I'm having say yourself on or I'm having X and Y on, they're like, okay, we'll just type it into chat GPT and you'll get
Yeah.
20 class questions asked them.
Hmm.
That's kind of what our luxury is now, that is an option. So it was interesting that you did say it. And I do want to say also on Raw Data Field, the album, I have listened to it countless times. I think it's superb.
Thanks.
And big tracks for me, like Jennifer, absolutely love. Um, was it Leviathan or
Leviathan.
Leviathan? I can't pronounce it, but thank you for correcting me.
It's all right.
And Shark Week are
Great.
absolute bangers.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially Shark Week. Like I know
I
that might
agree.
not be the big one, but like when I listened to that, I was just like, God,
Yeah, that's a
that's
tune.
that's a second or third listen straight away. But yeah, no, I love those songs. But when you get to the stage you're at, where, as you've said, you're happy with what you do, the litmus test you use is if you like the songs you write and you're happy with that.
Hmm.
Like right now, say for instance, tomorrow you finish the band. Obviously, I don't want that. I'm not suggesting you do that. But
Hmm.
if say your music career ended, like say right after this podcast, your music career is done, like would you look back and go, I'm absolutely happy with those innings, or is there still motivation, inspiration within you where you're like, I want to do this, whether it's maybe not necessarily fully musically or album related? Like, is there stuff you still want to achieve in your
Yeah,
line
I
of
mean,
work
I have a huge, well, in my line of work, that's the question. I would,
or outside of
um,
it, if
I
you
would
want to
obviously
explore that?
like the band to be much more popular than it is. I don't think that's wrong of me to say. But in terms of what the stuff we've made, I wouldn't change it. I think I'm very, very, very proud of what we've created. Um, I would love to direct more film. Um, that would be the angle I would attempt probably if this magical thing did happen. Um, and I guess I definitely have a large visual component, so I'm always drawing, and I make stuff in Blender now in 3D. So I would probably go down that route, and that's something I want to explore a bit more. Actually, that later on this year, I'm thinking of maybe uh, putting some of my art out there for the first time. I mean, I say the first time. I mean, I literally,
You
I
are an
designed
artist, but
our very first single cover and stuff like that, and I've directed nearly all our videos, etc. But whatever, some new kind of some unband related art. How about that? Because everything I've ever done has always been for the band.
okay. And just last thing on the band before we cap off with a few quick fire questions. Like, is there anything? Because I know it's now pretty much a year since the latest album did come out, and I know there's a few shows and stuff lined up. Like, but is there any immediate plans or midterm plans that you have for everything, or
Um, yeah, I'd say we have midterm plans. Doing a bit of writing, um, doing some little bits of recording. Nothing that's going to be a total departure. We're making more music, as you might imagine, but the whole system is kind of so much speeded up compared to when we started. Um, there's an expectation now that you need to make a record like every year and a half. Um,
which you don't normally do? I think you're like a 3-4 year break
well, yeah,
typically.
yeah, it'd be good if we were, but at the moment it feels like you get done with one, you've got to start another one immediately.
Yeah.
And that was like that after Reanimator. It was like, right, you've done that, right, make Rotate Feel, right, that's finished now, right, make this now. So it's fine, and it is my job, and this is what you do in this job. But I sometimes wish it would go a bit more slowly, and that we could just explore what we've made a bit more in depth before we're moving on. But that's where we are. We're very lucky to have an audience and to have a platform and all the rest of it. If I was a new band, trying to get people to listen to my record would be it would just kill me because it would be so difficult. It'd be so difficult. I really feel for bands in the 2020s.
And how? Because I know loads of bands here in Ireland that are absolutely incredible, like
Yeah,
really, really good bands. Some people say, oh, it's easier to get exposure now. You can just throw it up on YouTube or Spotify just on a whim. You can create, like, you could quite literally create a song, have it sound production wise
yeah,
pretty good, all
yeah.
within like an hour, and get it up online.
You could.
So the exposure is quite good. But why do you think it is so difficult now? Because like every
Because it's so
band I see,
crowded.
yeah, every band I see, it's either a band that was famous in 2004 coming and
Yeah.
selling out big arenas, but it's very rare I see a upcoming new exciting band.
Mm.
And like, why do you think that's the case?
It's because you can't get enough attention on you. There's just so it's just so crowded. Yeah, the fact that you can be on YouTube doesn't mean much if no one's watching it. That's the
Yeah,
thing. Um, but I think it's inevitable that this, when you have a scarcity of things, when there were, let's say there were 100 bands in 1966 that were on selling records in London or whatever. Now there's probably 10,000 bands in London, or that's not good numbers, but the difference is everything used to be focused on a smaller amount of product, and the product grows, the focus gets diluted. So yeah, 50 great bands in Dublin might all find a small audience, but to break out and become a huge band that everyone is listening to is next to impossible unless you have a shitload of money
yeah, that can solve a
or
fair.
some other connection, like you're going out with someone famous. That's about the only two ways it can happen now. Is you go viral through just luck, complete luck, or you have a shit ton of money and you throw it and throw it and throw it and throw it until enough people have gone, all right, what is this thing? And then they experience it, and your thing is no better or worse than the next man's. You just have money. Unfortunately, that's actually that's the only way you can get into it for definite or near to definite. And
Yeah,
the rest is pure luck now. Even you could be literally the best band that has ever existed, and it's still impossible to get heard. Like the quality of the product, unfortunately, has very little bearing now. But that's partly because the quality of everything has actually risen to a point where it's kind of unbelievable. You can probably get an app on an iPad that would record a band well enough that 50% of people would think that was done,
yeah, I
and
know
then
it's frightening.
you can put it on Spotify that evening, and you can make a video pretty well with a smartphone. It's good enough. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy world we're living in terms of scarcity. The scarcity model we're all used to, but maybe it shouldn't have ever been like that. Maybe that's a 20th century phenomenon. Is in that you have to listen to the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, and in 2060, why would that be true? You just listen to exactly what you want, probably written by a computer, to, and it'll be. I'm rambling now, but I
No,
imagine
it's
it's not going to be long before all entertainment is catered to the individual using artificial intelligence, and you will watch a film that doesn't have Brad Pitt in it, has you in it, and you're in it. You know,
yeah,
the idea of sitting down and taking in somebody's story will be quaint. It'll be,
yeah,
how can I be in this story?
yeah. It needs to be more relatable. I don't want to be
Yeah,
watching.
you wouldn't go to see Adele, you would become Adele. That's what it would be like, and not very long as well.
Yeah, I want to be buddies in the latest Tarantino film, not just watching
Exactly,
Brad Pitt and
exactly.
Leonardo. So, yeah, it's
Why
an
wouldn't
interesting
you? Who's
point.
going to turn that down?
No,
Nobody.
not many. But yeah, so John, the podcast formalities are over, and how I normally finish is just with a handful of quick fire
Sure.
questions, and then I can let you go enjoy the weekend. And yeah, I'll get straight into it. So, your favorite live show ever by your band, not by another band?
Oh, that's easy. Williams Green, Glastonbury, 2015 or 16. We just released No Reptiles earlier that week, so it must have been 2015. And we played our show on the larger of the stages, and then we played one the next day when we were all hungover. and feeling emotional. And we played No Reptiles, and I didn't think anyone would even know what it was, but they were all singing it back, and I just burst into tears right there on the stage. I was quite hungover, to be fair,
Yeah,
and I couldn't
not a
even
good
sing the song.
combination.
So the first, maybe the second time we ever played that song, I literally didn't even sing it, and the crowd sang it for me, and we were all just looking around like, "What the fuck is going on? This is a response we did not expect, let alone for that song." And that'll always be my number one emotional experience, probably with music. Full stop.
Class, and rightfully so. And next up is your favorite film of all time.
Um, I think it's probably uh, Evil Dead 2.
Okay, it's a bit of a left turn, but I'll
No,
accept it.
it's something I saw when I was very young, and the blend of horror and humor has never left me. I think it's amazing, stylish, groundbreaking, very inventive on a shoestring. It's everything. It's everything good. It's all the great things. It's a great actor and a great director. Being young and fucking about, and it was so inspirational to me when I was making films when I was 17, 18, 19. Just the idea that you can go into the woods with a camera and your friend and just fuck about and make scare the shit out of each other. Um, so yeah, I think it probably is that, all things considered.
Okay, so this is a bit more to do with your latest album, Raw Data Feel, but I had to
Hmm.
ask, and because one of my friends wanted to know, what does the line "He's Obama in the streets, but thinks he's Osama in the sheets" mean?
So at some point in 2021, I was looking at somebody's Tinder over their shoulder. It wasn't my account, so they were swiping through men, and I saw this one guy who'd written Obama in the streets, Osama in the sheets, and I literally just burst out laughing, wrote it into my phone, came back to it about 5 months later. I was like, right, I really want to put this into a song. I've no idea how I'm going to do it, and the way I put it in doesn't even. It's not as it's not as snappy as that. I had because I had to add words around it, like he thinks he's a. But I also, I suppose, it made it. I judged the person by writing it that way. He thinks he's rather than just being it. So it's not as pure. It's not as pure as I'd like. But I put it in there because it was just meant to be talking about somebody who's a bit full of themselves. But it's not really my thing. I stole it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
I'm not gonna pretend I made that up.
yeah.
But
Well,
I will say I have two hard drives on my PC, and they are called Obama and Osama.
good stuff. And this is a question that sometimes cause great concern slash debate and panic amongst musicians. But what is your favorite bridge that you've ever wrote with everything, everything, or interlude,
um,
whatever you want to call it?
it's probably Kimasabi. It's great. It's great. Love it. I mean, bridges are often the best bit of a song, actually. And yeah, I mean, I could think harder about it, but I think that's a very good one.
Okay, well said. And this is a common one that I ask everyone. So, what is the worst out of all these things? Cleaning the dishes, hoovering the house, or changing the bed sheets?
Oh, bed sheets easily.
Pretty much everyone. I think one person has said they say it's cleaning the dishes, but everyone
Cleaning the
else,
dishes is virtually a pleasure. Hoovering, yeah, it's not great. Fucking changing the bed, no
oh,
thanks.
it's a nightmare. Yeah, I
Yeah.
I cut my eye open the other day, so I was actually meant to change the bed sheets, but since that got cut, I was like, right, that's another 5 6 days.
How'd you do that?
It's the most uncool story ever. So I wish I got in a fight or something drunken rage. But I was in my kitchen with the housemates all upstairs in bed, and I was putting a room temperature Pepsi Max into the fridge, and it slipped. I went to reach and retrieve it, smashed off the side of the island
No,
or the
that
counter.
is quite good. That is quite good.
Yeah, but the issue was it was so sore I couldn't scream because the guys were asleep. So I literally was just getting sprayed with Pepsi Max while
Oh,
my
amazing.
t-shirt's covered in blood. So
Yes.
it
That sounds
shocked them when
pretty
they
good,
got up.
actually.
They got up the next morning and were like, "There's blood all over the floor. What happened last night?" So yeah, I didn't bother lie.
Nice.
But yeah, there we go. And then lastly, John, there is, yeah, last question. So if you could ask yourself one question today that I haven't asked you, what would it be?
Um, I honestly don't know. Um, what's for dinner?
Have you thought that far?
No,
Do you have any anticipation as to what you'll be having
no.
later
It's
on tonight?
Friday night. Um, no, none. Maybe some noodles.
Yeah, classic cornerstone of an English
It
diet
is.
right
It
there.
is.
But yeah, so listen, John. That's more or less it. I do want to thank you for giving so much insight and speaking so
My
candidly
pleasure.
about the ups and downs of your journey so far. And I hope the listeners. I know we've talked about art and how people view things, so I hope the listeners enjoy it. And
Great.
yeah, just want to congratulate you on your career as well. And as
Oh,
you said,
thanks.
you're straight back into the thick of it and working and
Yeah.
writing again. So I wish you all the best going forward, and
Thanks, dude.
I'm
Thanks
looking
very
forward
much.
to what comes next with the band and even maybe outside of the band as well.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No worries. Take care.
Nice one.